jam track massacre with Fancy Kennedy, aka Homeless Hendrix, Bobby Jack in the house. Now, when you're referencing Mixolydian and you're playing, it's important to understand that it's that sweet spot where the major scale has a flat 7. So, you know. You're on the 5 chord, you know, when you're in Mixolydian, it's the dominant mode, you know, so. The key signature is a 5th above it, a 4th above it. Like, so if you're in Mixolydian in A, the key signature that you're in is D, because a 4th above it is a major scale that has a major 7th in it, right? See, the dominant 7th chord always makes a little triangle with the Do, or the Aeolian tonic, right in the center of that triangle. And that's how Western music kind of turns around on itself. You know, you can always use the trick of, but in the case of a dominant, when you have a dominant for your tonic, and otherwise you're already playing on the 5 chord because you're doing a song in A that has a G chord in it, which, you know what I mean? So it's got a flat 7 chord in it, but it's got a major 3rd in the key of the song. Anytime you mix a major 3rd with a flat 7, Mixolydian is the result. It's that little spot where the suspended 4th is at. One of the spots. Right? You gotta watch out for that major 7th. But the more important thing about Mixolydian is it's relative to the key signature, a 4th above it, right? But also the really identifying thing about it, it's more important than the fact that it is got a flat 7th in a major scale, is the fact that it's one step up from Lydian. And what I mean by that is, dude, the most easiest way to recognize where you're at in music is the tritone, because there's, of the 7 combinations of 5ths, all of them are perfect except for the 5th that sits between the 3rd and 7th step of the scale, or the 7th and 3rd step of the scale, as it were. That's called the tritone, and it's a flat 5th, right? And importance of music is where that lies at any given moment, right? So in normally it's on the if you're usually it's on the 3rd and the major 7th. See the major 7th and the usually it's on the major 7th and the 4th, I should say, right? But Mixolydian moves it over to where it's on the flat 7th and the major 3rd instead of the 7th and the perfect 4th. So in music, anytime you jump a 4th, it moves the tritone back a half step and flips it around. Right? So in D, the tritone is 7, you know, C sharp is the 7 and G is the 4. But in A, right? In A, the tritone is a D and a G sharp, which is the 4th and the 7th. But in D, it's the seventh and the 4th, but a fret down. So they swap and move a fret down every time you jump a 4th up, right? And what that looks like is right, so the tritone is gonna slide down a fret, and the root is gonna move up a 4th. Oops. See how that works? And then, of course, jumping up a 4th is the same as jumping down a 5th. So the next one is. And that's where tritone substitution comes from, but I digress. The idea here is what you've done is, you know what I mean? You got to watch where your tritone is. When you're in Mixolydian, all right, so that's what, let me get back to how it's Lydian. Okay, so the thing about Lydian is it's got 3 whole tones in a row, which gives it that, gives it a tritone on the 3rd degree of the scale, right? And what I mean by that is whole tone, whole tone, whole tone. Right? Normally you're supposed to go whole tone, half tone. Right? But Lydian, since it's already the 4th tone of the scale, it has to go a whole tone up to the 5th, whole tone up to the 6th, and a whole tone up to the major 7th. So you can see that if you're in G Lydian, this is your major 7th, you're actually in the key of D. So see how there's 4 notes in a row that are each a whole step apart. And Mixolydian sits inside of that because the 4 chord, which in this case would be G, is Lydian. It's got the sharp 4th, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th chord, which is Mixolydian, has a regular 4th in it, and then of course the 6th is the minor scale. So that's the great thing about Mixolydian, is it sits a whole step behind the minor scale, and it sits a whole step in front of the Lydian scale, right? So Lydian, Mixolydian, and Aeolian. So it's All right, so, and the thing about it is the only accidental in it is the flat seventh. So when you're in the position of Mixolydian, see your 9 there, where my pinky is at? It's going to be a regular 9. The 6 underneath it there is also called a 13. Is going to be fine. So there's the 5, there's the 6, and there's the flat 7th. Or the 5, the 13th, and the flat 7th. And then right underneath the 6 is the suspended 4th. So the 9, the 6, and the suspended 4th are right there. So you can get, it's like that 4th is an 11, right? An 11 is just a 7 chord when you add a 4 to it. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 7 plus 4 is 11. Right? And a 9 chord is just a 7th chord that you've added a 2 to. So 7 plus 2 is 9. Right? So there's a 7 chord. If you add the 9 to it, then you get a 9 chord. If you're just adding a 9 to the chord and you're not using the 7th, that's not a 9th chord, that's an add 9. Right? So this is a add 9. Technically it's got to have at least a 7th in it before it's actually a 9th chord. But I digress. The point is that, you know, and that's the thing is this a 6 or is it a 13? Well, you want to call it a 6 because it needs to have a 7th in it if it's a 13th chord. That's why a 13th chord sounds like that. See, it's got the 7th, flat 7th in it, the major 3rd, and the 6. It's a 13th. And you can add the 9, the 11 right there, because this is the 4th step of the scale, and get the 9 up there. You know, the point is that when you're in this position, you're choosing your 9s or with your pinky there. Your 6s, 13s are right there with your pinky, and your 4s and your 11s are right there with your pinky too. And but in the middle, your 9's right there, right? So you always got to break your bar and back it up a fret, because you're 1, 2, 3. Your 9 and your major 3rd, right? It's a 9 if it's got a 7th there. So if you do a flat 7th with your 2nd finger there, and then you do a 2nd with your 3rd finger, you got a nice 9 chord, right? And so always remember that if you're wherever your root is on the E string, a fret behind it on an A string is the 3rd, and then on the D string is the 6, and then the 9. So it's 3, 6, 9, right? Right there. And if they're flat, flat 3, flat 6, flat 9, right? So behind the bar, the 3s, 6s, and 9s are behind the bar. So you know what I mean? If you're in Aeolian, you're going to have a minor 3rd and a flat 6. But if you're in Dorian, you're going to have that G sharp there. You're going to have that regular 6. If you're in a major scale, you're going to have the major 3rd. But if you're in Phrygian, you're going to need that flat 6 and the flat 9. And when you're wanting to get at your flat 13, right, because remember, my pinky is the 13th chord, so if you just back it up, it's like an F. If you're playing an A, F is the flat 13, right? And because that's the 6, and a 13th is a 7th plus a 6. 7 plus 6 is 13, right? But when you're playing on the E string for your root, on the B string is where your fourth, your sharp fourth, your raised 11th is behind you. It's behind the bar, right? Because here's the 4, 5, flat 7, so that's the sharp 11, you know what I mean? So if you need to play a sharp 11, it'll be back there somewhere, you know. Right, and the thing is that's so great about this key is if you borrow chords from adjacent modes, you know what I mean, then you can really do damage. And what I mean by that is if you're playing an A Mixolydian, you're on the 5 chord. And your tritone's up there because you're actually playing in B minor. Because D and B minor have the same notes, right? So A Mixolydian is just a whole step down from B minor, and it is the same scale, right? But if you, instead of playing A Mixolydian, you play A minor, then that's what I call borrowing from an adjacent mode. In other words, taking the 6th chord and moving it down 2 frets so it's underneath your hand, even though you're still playing an A. So you could call that a parallel mode, because now instead of playing that 5 chord in the key that you're in, now you've got a minor 3rd, flat 13th, and those that are particular to the pattern that's above you. And you can also borrow from the adjacent mode below you. So if you're playing in Mixolydian, then the Lydian mode is a whole step below you. See how in Mixolydian you've got a flat 7th and a suspended 4th. But in Lydian you've got a major 7th and a raised 4th. Well, if you just move the Lydian scale up, in other words, you just shift your mode up a whole step so that the Mixolydian framework moves up here, then all you have to do is raise the 4th step of the scale and you'll be changing it to Mixolydian. But when you do that, what you're actually doing is moving the tritone from where it was at right there to a new home, a fret higher, right? And that's easier to see if you just look at this. Like if you're on the 4 chord, then you move to the 5 chord, you get a dominant. All right, so the 4 chord's got a sharp 4 in it. Because it's a whole step below the dominant, so it's got to have that. Because we're in D, and the dominant chord always, its major third is the major 7th of the key signature that you're in. So a good way, it's hard to play in Lydian and make it sound like you're in that key. Try doing this. Get that major third in, get that sharp 4th in there. And then just go up to a dominant 7th chord on your 2 chord. Yeah, no one can say that you're not in A, and no one can say you're not in Lydian, because you've established a tritone there, right? That's why it's hard for people to play in Locrian, because if you can't establish a tritone, they feel like they can't center themselves. But it's a little different than that. My ear's starting to hurt. I'm going to cut this short. But thank you for listening. You're watching Jam Track Massacrer with Black Cracker.